the number of share will come down, your earning per share in the hands of the shareholder will increase. Now, how buyback can be done? Buyback are carried out in three ways. Number one, shareholders may get a tender offer where they have option to submit or tender all or proportion, all or portion. Now, understand the word all or portion of their shares within a given time frame at a premium to the current price. Again, at a premium to the current price. This is what I said. If company will go for the buyback at the same price, which is a market price, or company will go for the buyback maybe lower than the market price, everyone knows about it, so no one will accept it. If market value is 80 and company is coming up with the 70, and market value is 80 and company is coming with the, even if 80, even then shareholder will never accept the buyback offer. So it's like company may get a tender offer, so company will just fix a date in the within a given frame time. Company will come up with a date, like let's say from this date to this date the offer will remain open in the stock market. Like we buy and sell shares in the open market, similarly company will start buying shares from the open market. At that point of time, if any shareholder who wants to sell his shares, maybe the complete shareholding, the maybe all the shares whatever you have, or maybe portion of that, again there's no restriction, there's no limit, right? If company is coming with it, there's a limit on the company which we'll be talking about in the next slides. Like there's a restriction on the company ki how much company can go for buyback. There's a limit which I'll tell you. Like for example, for a company, as per the provisions of the Companies Act, company cannot go for buyback in a year for more than 25% of total equity shares. I'll just come up with an example of the same as well. If company is going for the buyback, make sure the company cannot go for buyback for more than 25% of total equity share in a financial year. Right? But as far as shareholders are concerned, as well as investors are concerned, if company is coming with a tender offer where the company will buy the share from the stock market openly, make sure there is no restriction on you. Like company will say, okay, I'm going to buy, let's say 10 lakh shares in the open market from this date to this date. In that given time frame, the company will say, I'm going to buy back my shares from the investor through stock exchange at the given frame time, right? That number of shares would be, let's say 1 lakh. So as an investor, I should see whether I want to sell my complete shares, all the shares, or whether I want to sell my portion of shares, my 10% or 20% or 30%, whatever, that I have to decide. But there's a restriction on the company ki company cannot go for buyback for more than 25% of shares, equity shares in a financial year. But as an investor, whatever the time frame would be given, it's your choice. The company will come with company will come up with a tender offer at a given price. Company will give an offer to the shareholders. Anyone who wants to sell, he can sell it. Right? Obviously, this is a benefit which company will give. And why? Because company knows it. Ki the shares of the company are undervalued or prices are going down. So better come up with a buyback offer so that we still have that faith of that trust of that investor. Companies may buy back shares in the open market over an extended period of time. May have outlined share repurchase program that purchases shares at a certain time or a regular interval. In the same way, where company come up with a plan in the open market, where company says, okay, I'm going to buy share in maybe over an extended period of time. So if you want, or maybe regular interval, the company will come up with a buyback. If you want, you can sell it to the company. Or maybe on proportionate basis from existing shareholders of the company. Right? Like as I said, the company can go for buyback of maximum 25%. And this is a limit as per the law. If company is coming with a buyback, company can come up with a buyback of only 25% of total shareholding of the company, right? Which I'll explain with the help of example as well. If companies planning to come up with a pro rata basis. So every shareholder will get a chance, will get an offer of 25% only. If I'm having 1,000 shares, company says, okay, so you can only opt for 250 shares. If you're having 1,000 shares, or maybe 10 shares, company will say 2.5, but obviously 2.5 not possible, so that may be your 2 or 3. So company will offer you that amount of shares. If I'm having 5 lakh shares, then accordingly on pro rata basis, on proportionate basis. This is what unlisted companies, public unlisted companies or private companies, so they always come up with a proportionate basis, because unlisted company shares are not listed on a stock exchange, so you cannot come up with a tender offer where company will buy its own share from the open market, because you are an unlisted company, you are a public limited, closely held public limited company, or maybe a private limited company where shares are not listed. In that case, company always comes up with an offer of 25%. Company says, I'm coming with a proportionate basis. So maximum I'm coming with a buyback of 25%. Company may come for the buyback for less than 25%. Law says maximum is 25% of equity share capital in a financial year. But company may come up with, let's say, 10%. Company may come up with a 15% offer. The company may come with 25% offer, right? So it's up to the company. But maximum limit is 25%. So if company is coming up with a, let's say, 15% offer, company is coming with a 20% offer, so then company can say, Ki, I can go for buyback. I'm coming up with a buyback offer of 20%. So every shareholder has a right to accept that offer given by the company up to 20% of shares he has. Up to 20%. So that's what we call, the company is going to buy back its shares on a proportionate basis, on a pro rata basis. So proportionately the company would be giving it to you. The law which governs the buyback is like section 68, 69 and 70 of the Companies Act 2013, read with rule number 17 of the Companies Share Capital and Debentures Rule 2014. And for the listed companies, if you are a company, if your entity is a listed company, listed on a stock exchange, then you have to go with the SEBI buyback regulations 2018 as well. So where company has to comply, if it's a listed company, then company has to comply both the things. So company has to comply with Companies Act as well, and company has to comply with the SEBI regulations as well if you are a listed company. Now, how company will buyback? The company may buy back its own shares out of, let's say, if company has a lot of free reserves. Company has a lot of free reserves. So from free reserves, company can buy back its shares. Reserves, free reserves, if we look at the definition of free reserves, those reserves which is basically part of the profits which has been kept by the company as a reserve for the future purposes. Like company can declare dividend out of it, company can use that reserves for the purpose of buyback. So ultimately, company, if company is coming up with a buyback, the company should have something from where company will go for the buyback. So one is out of free reserves. In this particular section 68, for the purpose of buyback, free reserve also includes securities premium account. So let me clarify here to the investors. Security premium account is not a free reserve, it's a kind of a capital reserve. As the name indicates, security premium accounts means, so whatever the premium company has calculated, whatever the amount of premium that company has received from the investor by issuing shares, debentures or any other security, so whatever the premium that company has received from the shareholders by issuing securities to them, that amount is kept in a separate account, that is securities premium account, as the name indicates. So that amount will be kept in a securities premium account, which is kind of a capital reserve, not exactly, which is a capital reserve, and there is a usage of that. From how company can use that reserve, where that reserve will be used by the company. So it is not like a free reserve which can be utilized or which can be paid to the shareholders as a dividend. But free reserve, which I was talking about, free reserve is a reserve which can be utilized by the company for the purpose of payment of dividend to the company as well, to the shareholders, payment of dividend to the shareholders as well, or maybe for the purpose of buyback. But as far as this security premium is concerned, that is not at all a free reserve, number one. Number two, it's like a capital reserve, and it can be utilized for the purpose of buyback. So it can be utilized for the purpose of buyback. So how company will go for buyback? Number one, whatever the amount lying with the company in the free reserve, that can be utilized. So make sure the company should have that much of reserves. So company can't go for buyback. Let's say if company does not have balance in the bank account, company does not have any liquidity, and company does not have any reserves, no free reserve, no security premium account, and company has not proceeds of issue of any other kind of security. So why company will go for buyback? Ultimately, if company is going for a buyback, that means company will have to give that money to the shareholders. If my company is, let's say my total capital is and reserves to in totality, I have, let's say, 1 crore and I have to pay 25 lakhs, that which is 25%. So that means the company should have 25 lakhs. Maybe that's lying in the reserves, maybe lying in the security premium account. So if company does not have those kind of reserves or security premium account, then from where company will do the buyback? Obviously, company can't do the buyback or if the company does not have these kind of reserves. So law says make sure the company should have free reserves, the company should have securities premium account, and or there may be a possibility company can go for the buyback out of the proceeds of issue of any other kind of securities. But make sure not of the same class, which says company cannot do that. What company cannot do that is, I am issuing equity shares. So I am issuing equity shares to the company, to the shareholders, and whatever the proceeds which I am getting, whatever the money that I am getting from the shareholders, from the investor, out of that I am going to buy back the equity shares. Now see how it is possible. You will also say that's how it can be possible. That today the company has issued equity shares to me, and tomorrow company is saying out of that money I'm going to buy back your shares. So that's the law says proceeds of the issue of other specified securities, but not of the same kind of securities or shares which company is going to buy back. The company is planning for buyback. But obvious, because in any case it cannot be like first taking money from the shareholders, then again on the next day giving it back to the shareholder. So it cannot be done so, right? Now it says in simple words, for the purpose of buyback, the sources would be the three sources. Number one is free reserves. Number two is securities premium account. Number three is proceeds of issue of any shares or other specified securities. If company issues security premium account, then company has to create just like a entry in this in the balance sheet of a company. So when we are utilizing the securities premium account, but we have to create a capital redemption reserve as well. So just a not that much of relevant for this buyback purpose, but yes, whenever company utilizes security premium account, in that case the company has to create another reserve, which is a capital redemption reserve. So where the company has to switch the amount, because to show that in the balance sheet, whatever the amount the lying in a security premium account that has been utilized for the purpose of buyback, so that will go to capital redemption reserve account, right? And make sure if a company is planning for buyback, if company is going for the buyback, make sure the company should have a proper authority as per its article of association. If it is not there, then first company will have to alter its article as per the law. Then make sure the company should have that power. The company should have that authority in the articles of the association of the company, where company will go for, where it will be allowed to the company, it will be authorized by the company's main document, memorandum and article of association, that company can go for buyback. And make sure approval of shareholders is required by passing a special resolution. So whenever the company has to take certain major decision in a company, wherever the company wants to do something which has an impact on the investor, so we have to take the approval of shareholders. So maybe you will call their meeting, or maybe you'll be taking the approval through postal ballot, whatever. So as per your convenience. So whenever the company is planning for the buyback, make sure we need to take the approval of shareholders by passing a special resolution. Just sort of, let's say, majority approval. Like shareholders will approve that. Yes, we agree with that. We are giving approval to the shareholders to go for the buyback. Now, how much buyback that can be done? Like as I said, ki maximum buyback that company can do is 25%, right? With the approval of shareholders. If a company wants to avoid, if a company wants to avoid the route of shareholders, ki I don't want to go to the shareholder necessarily, I don't want to take the approval of shareholders, or maybe sometime it is not feasible, sometime practically it is not possible for the company to take the approval of shareholders. In that case, what company can do is, company up to a certain limit, company can take the approval of the board and can go for the buyback, which can be the less than 25%, but maximum that can be the 10%. But that is only if a company does not want, or maybe company does not want to go to the shareholders, or maybe it is not possible for the company to take the approval of shareholders. So what company can do, restrict yourself to the approval of the board, which is quite easy as compared to the shareholders, which is quite easy to take the approval of board. So company, by taking the approval of board without going to the shareholder, without approaching the shareholder, company can take the approval of the board, right? The company can take the approval of the board, but in that case, company can only go for buyback maximum 10% of the paid up equity capital and free reserves of the company. Maximum 10%. So now it is up to the company. It is up to the company. If you think you can take the approval of shareholders, then go for 25% maximum limit, right? And if company thinks ki company cannot go to the shareholder, or maybe it is not possible for the company to approach the shareholders, you want to restrict yourself only to the approval of the board, then make sure in that case you can do only maximum 10%. So it is a company which has to decide whether to go for 10% or whether to go for the 25%. So it's up to the company. Absolutely. The buyback is maximum 25% of aggregate of total paid up share capital and free reserves of the company, right? Right now, maximum 25%. That means, again, I'll just repeat again. If with the approval of the board only, it is 10%. Only 10% of the paid up equity capital and free reserves. Free reserves include security premium account as well for this buyback. If company can take the approval of shareholder, if company can easily approach the shareholders, then it can be maximum 25%. 25% of total capital, total paid up capital, which includes equity and preference both, and free reserves. So here free reserves includes again security premium as well for the purpose of this buyback. So it can be 25% of equity, 25% of capital and free reserves. But for that you will have to take the approval of shareholder. So this is now basically the complete total amount of buyback which company can give it to the shareholders. Total buyback, that is total amount of buyback, which is 25%. Provided, again, we have the proviso here is in a financial year. So basically there are two things which investor that has to understand is, number one is total amount of buyback. I am talking about in terms of money. How much money that amount company can give, which says maximum 25% of capital and reserves. Amount. Let's say, I'll just give you with an example. Okay, I'll just come to that example. Let's say, now, total capital of the company's paid up capital we'll talk about is 90 lakhs. Equity share capital, 9 lakhs equity shares at the rate of 10 each. Preference shares capital paid up is 10 lakhs. The total paid up capital is 1 crore. I'm just giving a very simple example, and reserve the company has is 1 lakh, and the security premium account of the company which has is 15 lakhs. Now see, capital is 1 crore, including equity and preference both. Free reserves are 1 lakh, and the security premium is 15 lakhs. Now if company is planning to come up with a buyback, right? If company is planning to come up with a buyback only with the approval of board, company is not planning to go to the shareholders. So company is planning to come up with the buyback only with the approval of the board. So which is 10% of equity capital, not preference, which is 90 lakhs plus free reserves, which includes security premium as well. So it will be 90 lakhs equity capital, 1 lakh your free reserves, 15 lakhs is your security premium account. So that will come to 10% will be 10 lakh 60,000. That is total amount that which would be given to the shareholders. And if company is coming with a 25%, let's have another example. If company is planning to go to the shareholders, where company can take the approval of shareholder by passing special resolution, then again 25% would be aggregate of total capital. Let's say 1 crore is a total capital. Now here we will include equity and preference both. And it talks about the aggregate of paid up capital. In 10% it talks about equity capital. So now it would be aggregate of paid up capital, which is 1 crore, 15 lakhs security premium account, 1 lakh is we have free reserves. So the total amount money that would be given to the shareholders under the route of buyback, that would be 29 lakhs. So this is a maximum amount. It can be less than 29 lakhs, but in any case it cannot be more than 29 lakhs. So maximum amount that can be given by the company to the shareholders under the route of buyback by taking approval of shareholders, so that would be 29 lakhs. This is a 25%. Now out of this, how much would be the equity shares? So that is 29 lakhs is basically the amount which company will give. But how much would be the number of equity shares that company can opt for, the company can buy back, which says 25% of the equity share capital. So now total equity share we have is 9 lakhs. 9 lakhs. So now we are talking about units. We are talking about equity share which company can buy back. So now just see the example very carefully. The maximum shares. Earlier I was not talking about shares. I was talking about total amount of buyback, which includes 25% of aggregate of paid up capital, reserves and security premium account. Now here I'm talking about the number of shares which company can go for buyback is like 25% of equity shares. Now number of shares, now units I'm going to talk about is 9 lakh equity share the company has. 25% of 9 lakh is 2,25,000 shares. Now that means now if company is coming up with a buyback, if company is planning for buyback, make sure the maximum shares which company will go for buyback is 2,25,000 shares. And the amount which would be given to them, to those equity shareholders holding 2,25,000 shares, that amount will be 29 lakhs. Right? So now total amount would be 29 lakhs. Maximum that amount can be 29 lakhs. And the number of shares which will be bought by the company, that will be 2,25,000. Then accordingly, if you will divide the total amount with the number of maximum number of equity shares permissible as per the law, that will be, if you will divide this, that will be the price at which company will go for the buyback. That will be the price. So 29 lakhs divided by 2,25,000 shares, that will be my price. So at that price, company will opt for the buyback, and make sure that price, obviously the company will go for the valuation as well. Without valuation, company cannot go for the buyback. So there has to be a proper valuation. You have to support a document which should be given to the shareholder as well. On what basis you have calculated the price? On what basis you are calculating? On what basis you are saying the company is going to buy back, or company is going for the buyback at 80 rupees per share, or maybe 90 rupees per share, or maybe 10 rupees per share, whatever. So the valuation, proper valuation would be done by the company, right? Now, make sure if company is going for the buyback, so the point has to be taken care of by the companies. Obviously, your equity will come down. So I'm going to buy back my equity and reserves. My net worth will come down because I have bought back my equity shares from the company. Obviously, my debt will be increased. So make sure, law says, as per the provisions, your debt equity ratio. So there is a benchmark for the debt equity ratio, which is basically the 2:1. Law says make sure your debt equity ratio should not exceed the 2:1. So it should not hamper, it should not have the impact on your debt. And make sure all the shares should be fully paid up. 1 year, there is a gap. If company is coming with a buyback offer, make sure between two buybacks there should be a gap of 1 year. So whenever you have closed the buyback, make sure that another buyback will not be issued by the company for the next 1 year. Condition of buyback, we have already discussed that, with the approval of the board, the 10% buyback can be done with the equity capital and free reserve, otherwise 25% of total capital along with the free reserves and security premium with the approval of shareholders. Example, we have already covered it. Maximum number of units that can be about debt equity ratio. I said it cannot be more than 2:1 in any case. Make sure if company is coming up with a buyback, so it should not be more than 2:1, right? Capital redemption account, that's it. So now, simple is whatever we discussed, the one last point is just make sure if company is coming with a buyback, that means today you're going to buy back shares from the shareholders. So make sure there should not be a possibility to come up with the issue of further shares in future. So again, there's not at all there's a possibility. Today I'm going to buy back. Today I've returned money to the company, and after 1 month I'm asking money from the shareholders by issuing more shares. So which is not at all practically possible. Law say there has to be a 6 months cooling period. Within that 6 months, make sure the company should not come up with the issue of shares again, or the same shares. Like today I've purchased equity shares from the shareholder. Tomorrow I am issuing shares to the shareholders. So law says if you had a plan of issuing shares to the company, then why you came up for the buyback? So make sure there has to be a cooling period of 6 months. So within 6 months, the company cannot issue shares. Then accordingly, company will issue offer letters to you. Company will issue offer letter. Any shareholders, whosoever wants to buy back, who wants to accept the buyback offer, make sure it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory for the company even to come up with a buyback. But if company is coming with a buyback offer, make sure it is not mandatory for you to accept it. So it's up to you. So keeping in mind your calculations, keeping in mind the market value, keeping in mind the book value, keeping in mind the value which company is coming with a buyback. So within that limit, so you have to decide whether you want to choose for the buyback or not, right? So this is all from my side. So for the buyback, we'll come up with more, just to share more topics and more knowledge with the investor very soon. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.